stuff. Why don't we talk, first of all, about the Netherlands 2, Japan 2? Am I right to call that a dark horse battle just to set the table?
In terms of Japan, certainly. Feels like Netherlands maybe have a bit too much pedigree, like historically, I guess, to be labelled as dark horses.
Have they?
Well, they've made 3 finals. So
How many did they win?
How many have England won in the last 60 years?
That's low. Touche. Fine. All right. Reject my premise of the dark horse battle. That is absolutely fine. We had Japan falling behind twice in this one, but coming back each time, of course. I think, Taylor, if not the most entertaining, then the highest quality game so far. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I am obligated to say that USA 4, Paraguay 1 is the best game of the tournament so far. But this is, I think, for neutrals, for just general entertainment from start to finish, probably the game of the tournament thus far. I feel like the Dutch came out in an interesting lineup. They did some interesting things in terms of the formation and approach, but also some of the personnel. And I felt like had a good game plan, and I think executed it pretty well. I think Japan, for their part, played the exact game we thought they can play when they're like need to have their backs against the wall. They can defend deep. They can clog lanes. They can make life really difficult. And then they are capable of also hitting on the break if they need to. But once the Dutch took the lead, they're also able to come out of that shell, the Japanese, and play really like progressive, pretty attacking soccer with a high degree of technical ability. And that's what I think makes Japan so interesting to watch, is that they can be ultra defensive and then they can be really attacking like at the drop of a hat. And it's kind of amazing to see.
Yeah, I think this was probably the first game of the tournament so far where it felt like both teams were able to impose themselves in different periods of the match. There was that ebb and flow. The match had multiple different phases. I know Brazil and Morocco was a heavyweight clash, and that was interesting in its own right. Kind of feel like Brazil were quite poor in that match generally. We're coming away from this one, I think we saw the positives, the strengths of both the Netherlands and Japan. And obviously the Dutch had much more of the ball in the first half, but they really struggled to create against that Japanese low block. And Taylor, we were talking about the broadcast commentary that we were watching, and they were kind of focusing on Japan's inability to get out, and they were getting some heat for being
they're staying 10 to 15 yards too deep. Eventually this is going to cost them. The Dutch are already kind of probing. And were they probing, Graham?
Well, I mean, I guess they were trying to probe, but it felt like Japan had kind of they'd anticipated this dynamic, and they were more than happy to stay compact and ask the Netherlands to break them down, which they weren't able to do. And there were some of the things that the Dutch were doing that I found a little bit confusing, particularly the use of Denzel Dumfries, where he was being used as a stay-at-home right-back behind Crescencio Somerville. And I know, and Taylor, you pointed this out when we were watching it, there were triggers where Dumfries and Somerville would switch to try and get Dumfries away from a defender and into space. But in my opinion, it resulted in having two players who want separation in that area of the pitch where there was no separation and congested it. And that kind of played into Japan's hands. And just generally, I felt the Dutch were, and look, their fans might be saying, I told you so, because a big deal was made of Xavi Simons and his injury. Just a lack of nimbleness in the final third, where they had a lot of the ball, but they needed to eliminate some Japanese defenders, and that wasn't really happening in the game until, I guess, the Van Dijk goal.
So I think the Netherlands were the narrow favourites going into this game, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Coming out of it, I feel like Japan are a bit more built for tournament soccer. Is that fair to say? Given how compact they are, the way they're happy not to have the ball, they're very organised, and they can have those dynamic moments going forward very efficiently, it seems.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it kind of reminded me of Morocco's performance against Brazil, where they have that toggle of they're not just one trick pony. They have different, I'm using all the cliches here, strings to their bows. But you get the point I'm trying to make.
They have a lot of tools in their belt.
Tools in the shed. Sharpest tool in the shed. That's what I was going for.
If anything, the tools were too sharp, I'd say.
That's the one. In tournament football, you're going to have to react to different phases and in different circumstances in different matches. And we saw that in 90 minutes from Japan here, just as we did from Morocco in their match. I think the most exciting thing for Japan is it feels like they've got more to give than this in other matches. They've drawn with the Netherlands, and they deserve to get something out of the game. And ordinarily, you'd think that's a big result for them. And yet, I don't know if they played that well. It feels like they've got another gear, or maybe even two gears to go to in this tournament. And I think if they can do more to get Kubo into half spaces and on the turn, I thought we saw glimpses from him, but maybe he didn't have his normal influence on this match. And I certainly think they can give Ueda more service. Yeah. There was one Ueda opportunity when Kamada played an incredible splitting pass from deep, and he was in behind, but the angle was a little bit tight, and he sort of sliced it wide of the goal. If they can get him into the penalty box more often, or even into those quick transition moments, then I think that could be something that really moves the needle for Japan. I think also if they can get Maeda to be the one-man pressing machine as he is for Celtic, I genuinely think he's world-class at that one specific quality, nothing else. But it feels like they've got more to get out of these players in this team.
Yeah. I think for the Dutch, I think my final takeaway from this one is that if they end up making a run, I kind of think we look back on this as a sign of how they were able to do so, because I think there's an argument that this is Ronald Koeman respecting his opponent and not expecting to beat a Japanese team that could be perceived as weaker, because they're not and haven't been in past tournaments. And so again, I look at that left-hand side for a moment and some of the midfield personnel that were deployed, and you've got Mickey van de Ven, we already talked about. You've got Tiani Reinders as kind of your left-sided central midfielder, and you've got Frankie de Jong as your single pivot, but oftentimes looking like another center back, basically, because he's following around and doing so much defensive work. And then I wonder, like, well, why were they deployed that way? And the Japanese right side is Takefusa Kubo and Ritsu Dewan, like, who can so clearly combine and do so many different things individually, but then as a unit play off each other so well, like hit little 1-2s, have like quick little interchanges that get in behind defenses. And I think in some ways that could be seen as the Dutch respecting the talent of their opponent. So if they make a run, that might be seen as Koeman, or you could look back on it as Koeman making like good defensive adjustments, good defensive decisions, and then trying to overload the other side to make something happen. If they don't, then maybe it is exactly what we said, which is kind of a lack of that creative talent coming to bear.
Taylor's tied a nice bow on the Netherlands. I'll try to tie a bow on Japan. I think this Japan team is so fascinating, and we talked about them coming into the tournament. Coached by Hajime Moriyasu, who's been in charge of this team since 2018.
Looks sharp as well.
Yeah, always looks sharp. That's a long time. That's a really long time in international soccer, where you don't see a lot of coaches getting that sort of runway. He was in the youth national team setup in Japan before that. He understands the program. He understands the rigors of international soccer and what makes it unique. Mauricio Pochettino had this quote after the win over Paraguay that you don't really get to coach the players outside of major tournaments, because you only have, a training session here, training session there, a flight here, a flight there, and then all of a sudden players are back to their clubs. Because this Japan team has had so much continuity for so long, they are able to do multiple things. And where I'm going with this is a group that I think is poised to be very, very tricky from this point forward, where you have Sweden now on 3 points, and we'll get to their win over Tunisia later. And then you have Japan and the Netherlands both on 1. Maybe all 3 of those teams get out. Maybe they don't. We'll find out as time goes on. But Japan now have 2 games against teams that don't really want to dominate the ball. Sweden, we saw today, didn't really have an appetite to totally dominate the ball throughout the entire game against Tunisia. And we know Tunisia do not want to dominate the ball as much as Hannibal wants them to. So Japan are going to have to show a different side of themselves, a different side than they showed in the first half, and something more akin to what they showed in the second half. I don't know how that's going to go for them. I don't really know, Ryan, sort of where you launched this before, if they are the perfect fit for tournament soccer, or at least for this group of tournament soccer. But I do know that I think maybe more than any group outside of the US's group, this is the one that I'm most interested in right now.
One final tiny little point for me. How long has Moriyasu been there?
Since 2018.
So a good long while, as Joe said. But Graham and I were talking about this during the game, that in our Soccer 101 episode on like Japanese football, the Japanese have a 100-year plan to win the World Cup. And I believe we are in year 30 of that. So Moriyasu, just a baby. He's got 92 years to go. But like, you look at the progress that program has made. You look at the progress the league itself has made, how they've moved teams around and found more stability and found more talent, and then did a better job of exporting it abroad while still bringing young players through. And this Japanese team has sort of gone from strength to strength to strength. It's interesting to see what will come in World Cups to follow this one, but for right now, I feel like they're in a very strong position. So too does the explosion behind me.
Wow, yeah, that was quite something. As is
an emphatic point. That's how I end my points. Is I have somebody off the distance blow something up.
I am reeling from 100-year plan. That's unreal.
We didn't even know what we were having for dinner
at
7 o'clock and 6 o'clock tonight, and the Japanese over here are planning 100 years ahead.
I remember in business class learning about the Kaizen philosophy, where the Japanese philosophy in business is to make very small improvements very gradually over time. That is that. In very much demonstrated 100 years.
2 different business class mentions in this first segment, meaning completely different things.
Yeah.
Fascinating. English is just amazing, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive. Yeah. And what a time to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Ivory Coast win over Ecuador and Germany scoring big against Curacao. It's Group E coming next. Join us then.
Do you think that